Are the Miami Heat the sleeper team in the Eastern Conference? Because I was looking at the roster today and I was thinking about it. I was like, well, hold on a second. The Miami Heat, we know every year they figure out a way, to get things done and to just make the playoffs and all that stuff. So I was looking at their roster and I was like, I can't say that they might not be the sleeper team in the Eastern Conference, because when I looked at the roster, I'm like, okay, wait a minute. So obviously they still have, of course, Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo from last year and stuff like that. Well, been there for a while, but you know what I'm saying. But they also traded for Andrew Wiggins during the trade deadline last year. That was their Jimmy Butler trade. And so Andrew Wiggins, I know that there are a few polarizing players in the NBA, and Andrew Wiggins is not polarizing in terms of like his off-court stuff, but there are people who really love Andrew Wiggins and people who don't necessarily love Andrew Wiggins, his game and stuff like that. But however you feel about Andrew Wiggins, you saw him in the 2022, NBA championship run with the Golden State Warriors. And obviously he was the #1 overall pick for a reason. So talented, we know this. And he didn't have a full season with the team. And after the Jimmy Butler trade, everything was kind of crazy. So like, I don't blame them, so to speak, for how the season, turned out in the end. I feel like if they had a full season with the roster that they had, maybe it would have been a little different. I'm not saying they would have gotten out of the East, or I don't even know if they would have gotten out of the second round or anything, but I'm just saying like, maybe it would have gone slightly different. But regardless, you have Bam Adebayo, you have Tyler Hero, you have Andrew Wiggins. Okay, those are 3 really good players just right there. But now hold on a second, because Davion Mitchell, I don't know if people really noticed that he, got that, I think he got 2-year, what was it, 2-year, $12 million, or I forgot exactly what he got from Miami, but he got like, like a decent deal. Like it wasn't anything like super large, but it was like a good deal. Sorry, the AC is making noise. I'm sorry, it does that sometimes. You're gonna have to just ignore the noise. Outside of the AC noise, Davion Mitchell got a decent sized contract. And so we know Davion Mitchell, or if you don't know, very good defensive guard. Like he's going to give you high energy every single night. So that is definitely like, if you talk about like a Miami type player, he is a Miami type player. Like that is exactly the type of player they like to have on their roster. So now you have him to either come off the bench or start, depending on, what you want to do. But here's the kicker. Do you remember what they also just did in the offseason? They traded for Norman Powell. Now, I know we're all talking about, the Clippers side of things and how they got John Collins, and then of course now they have Bradley Beal on the roster, which I'm sorry about the AC again, it just keeps making noise. I wish it would stop, but it will stop eventually. But anyway, so we're talking about the Clippers perspective and how they got, John Collins and Bradley Beal, and the roster looks nice. But how about we talk about the fact that the Miami Heat got Norman Powell, and they only had to give up Kevin Love, who, as good as Kevin Love was in his prime, was not in the rotation anymore. Like, he's towards the end of his career. And Kyle Anderson, decent player, but like, he's not Norman Powell. So Miami Heat turned Kevin Love and Kyle Anderson essentially into Norman Powell, who I thought should have been an All-Star last year, and a lot of people thought that, or some people thought that. But like, so now you think about the roster and you're like, okay, wait a minute. Now they have Tyler Hero. Now they have Bam Adebayo. Now we have Andrew Wiggins, right? Now we also have Davion Mitchell there. But you add Norman Powell to that mix, their guard, their guard position is loaded. Like, it's good. I think they need to get another point guard. That's my opinion. I always like use Chris Paul as the example, just because like in these kind of situations, like you have a guard in Tyler Hero who can play the point. He was playing the point last year and stuff like that. But like, you don't necessarily want Tyler Hero being the point guard, right? And you just want kind of like a Chris Paul type player if he's out there somewhere, someone who could just, run the point, run the offense, and just be more of a pure passer, not necessarily, a big time scorer. Not that they can't score whoever this player is, but like, you want something like that. But on top of that, or besides that rather, their guard position is good. You have Tyler Hero, who was an all-star last year. So now you have 2 all-star guards on the roster in the rotation, and both of them could start. And guess what? Tyler Hero has come off the bench and been their 6th man multiple times. So you can ask Norman Powell to be like a 6th man for them, or Tyler Hero. And guess what? They both will probably give you 20 plus a night. So now you're looking at Miami and you're like, okay, hold on a minute. Their guard rotation is set. And then, again, you have Kel'el Ware, which, if you don't remember, when they were in talks for Kevin Durant, because they were trying to trade for Kevin Durant, they refused to include Kel'el Ware in the deal. And obviously we know because he has a lot of upside and potential and stuff like that. But like, we are talking about Kevin Durant. They think so highly of Kel'el Ware. I'm not saying they're wrong about it. I'm just saying, like, they think so highly of Kel'el Ware that they didn't trade him in the Kevin Durant deal. And I don't know because I wasn't in the negotiations, of course, but it seemed like that was the determining factor in getting the deal done. Like, it seemed like if they included Kel'el Ware in whatever deal it was, that the deal would have went through. So if they think that highly of Kel'el Ware, we may need to, and if you didn't watch him last year, he played well, but I'm saying, like, if they think that he is not worth Kevin Durant, and again, we understand Kevin Durant is, closer to the end of his career than the beginning, so, like, it may also been a thing, like, they didn't know if they would be able to, build that championship roster right now and have that 1 to 2 year window with Kevin Durant, so that also is a factor. But still, you have a chance to get Kevin Durant, and again, it looked like in the reports, really the sticking point was Kel'el Ware. So Miami knows what they're doing when it comes to scouting, drafting, developing players. So if they think that highly of Kel'el Ware, you may need to be on the lookout for him next season. And so I say all that to say, like, again, at every position, like, they have somebody who is, or 1 or 2 or whoever, that is definitely someone who would be on many other teams and give quality minutes to these teams. So I don't know. Miami might be the sleeper team in the East, because every year, and the other thing you can say about Miami is, besides that, talking about their talent and the players who are on the roster and stuff like that, Terry Rozier is still on the roster too, by the way, but I saw some kind of report about, the situation that's going on. Something else came up. I'm not going to get into that. Go look it up after this live stream. Something else happened with, the thing that was happening with him last year and stuff like that. So I don't know what's going to happen there, but they do still have Terry Rozier for now. Hopefully everything turns out good for, him and the team. But besides that, the Miami Heat always figure out a way to get it done. Always. Every year. It doesn't matter who's on the roster, because we can go back to 2-3 years ago with Jimmy Butler, and I obviously know we're talking about Jimmy Butler. Like, playoff Jimmy. But the guys who were around him were guys that a lot of other teams either wouldn't have thought to pick up, or I don't know how to explain it. It was just like Eric Spoelstra maximizes everybody's talent and potential. Like, he figures out how to get the best out of everybody. And there are some other coaches in the NBA who do that too, but like, he is like the best of the best at it. Like, or 1A and 1B with some other coaches, but like, he is that guy in terms of coaching. And so, obviously hard work from Gabe Vincent and Max Strus, and I'm not saying that the players didn't do the work or anything like that, and Caleb Martin, but like, do you remember that playoff run? The whole, talk about that team was, oh, they have 7 undrafted players. That was literally the whole talk. And Jimmy Butler was the 30th overall pick, by the way, if you don't remember. Jimmy Butler was not a top draft pick. He was the 30th overall pick in the draft. But besides that, the whole talk around that team that made the NBA Finals with Jimmy Butler was that they had 7 undrafted players. Gabe Vincent had, like, an amazing playoffs. Like, not just a good playoffs, amazing. Caleb Martin, like, did you see him in the series against Miami, in the series against Boston? Like, unstoppable. There was a conversation of potentially having Caleb Martin being the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. That was actually a conversation. I don't know if you remember, but like, he played that well. Now, obviously went to Jimmy Butler, you know, and he deserved it. But I'm just saying, like, that was a conversation that Caleb Martin, and I think he got some votes too, but like that Caleb Martin could win Eastern Conference Finals MVP. That is how well he played. So I say all that to say, the Miami Heat have, you know, some household names, so to speak, that you could look at on the roster and be like, oh, like, we know those players are good. We know Bam Adebayo. We know Tyler Hero. Again, Norman Powell should have been an All-Star last year. Unfortunately, did not make it. But again, if you have Norman Powell coming off your bench, you're getting 20 a night at the minimum. And if he's not coming off the bench and he's starting, we saw what he did with the Clippers. Yes, James Harden was there with him, of course. He didn't just do it by himself, but Norman Powell was one of their most important players. And the other thing about Norman Powell is he is clutch. Like, every time the Clippers, if you watch the Clippers, every time the Clippers needed a basket, in the fourth quarter, at the end of games, whenever, if you gave it to Norman Powell for 3, because it ended up being a 3 a lot of the times, but if you gave it to Norman Powell, he made it, like, every time. Like, I literally can't remember a 3 that Norman Powell needed to make for the Clippers in the clutch, whenever it was, and he missed. Now, I'm sure he obviously missed at some point, but what I'm trying to say is, like, the same way, and I don't want to compare the two, but like the same way that Jalen Brunson won Clutch Player of the Year, and I'm not saying Norman Powell is Jalen Brunson or did what Jalen Brunson has done in the clutch for the Knicks, but what I'm saying is, like, he was that guy in the clutch for the Clippers. So Miami Heat now have someone on their roster who can do that for them when they need a basket, kind of how Jimmy was their closer as well. Like, I'm not comparing the talent and saying he's better than Jimmy. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying something that Miami maybe didn't have as much last year, although you could say Tyler Hero was that guy for them, and fair enough. He definitely, you know, could close and hit clutch buckets too. But I would say one of the things that they were, I guess, missing in a little bit last season was more so that closer. Again, it could have been Tyler Hero at times and stuff like that, but I felt like there were some times where they were looking for someone to just, like, take over, if that makes sense. And Norman Powell can do that for you. So, again, now you have him or Tyler Hero coming off the bench. Either way, it's an all-star, right? So, like, that's crazy. But again, back to Andrew Wiggins, too. I know people, like, in a way, I understand the argument where it's like, we are just talking about the championship year 2022. What about the rest of his career? And it's not like the rest of his career he didn't put up good stats. That is not the argument about Andrew Wiggins. But some people question his impact and stuff like that. And people are like, well, you 1 year, 2022, you know. I just know that people don't like that example just because they're like, what about the rest of the years? And I understand that every single season was not as good as his 2022 year with the Warriors. Fair enough. But that showed you that he can be that type of player. And I think Miami is a good fit for him because he's kind of back in that role that he was on the Warriors, where he's not going to be the first option that will likely be Tyler Hero or Norman Powell at this point, or Bam Adebayo, depending on how you look at it. Probably Bam Adebayo, honestly. So Bam Adebayo, and then he may be the third option, which is kind of what he was in the Warriors, which is where he thrived. So the defense is still obviously going to guard him, but at the same time, he gets to kind of play to his strengths and what he's best at. And we just, again, know Eric Spoelstra just gets the best out of everybody. So I feel like, I didn't even really talk about Bam Adebayo, but we know what Bam Adebayo has done in his career, so I feel like it's self-explanatory on how he impacts the Miami Heat. But of course, he's still there. So I feel like overall, this roster, like, I'm not saying they're coming out of the East, but with that talent, with the depth that they're building, and the fact that, I know I keep talking about Eric Spoelstra, but, like, his impact is really, really important to the team. So if we put all those things together, I talked about the Raptors in a previous live stream, like kind of maybe going under the radar for some people. Just because like if you look at the roster also, it's kind of like, hold on a minute, like they have some good players on that roster. Like I know that, you know, this last year didn't necessarily go the way that they would hope to, but like they have some good players there. So with Miami, it's kind of like, okay, wait a minute, like the Clippers, you know, did pretty well for themselves, but so did Miami. So I don't know. Like, I don't know if we should be sleeping on Miami. Again, I'm not saying they're going to the championship, but they figure out how to get things done. Somebody said Norman is a bit overrated. Well, I guess you could say, I guess I understand that argument just because I understand because like when he was on the Clippers, people were, you know, trying to get him to be an all-star. And the fact that he didn't end up being an all-star, obviously then people are kind of trying to, I don't know how to explain it, but like I know what you're saying. Like when people pull for someone to be an all-star or get to a certain level that they haven't gotten to, then people are looking at that player and they're like, his level is higher than people thought that he was before, if that makes sense. But I don't think Norman Powell is overrated, but I understand what you're saying. I feel like his impact, like I feel like he has a really big impact on the teams that he has been on. And again, especially the Clippers, just because it's most recently and that's where people saw him. And if we think about it, Kawhi was not there for majority of the year. Like Kawhi only played like 30 games and he was awesome in those 30 games. But the Clippers were a top 5, 6 seed or 7 seed, whatever, you know, what they were doing without Kawhi. And of course, James Harden was really good. Zubac was really good. Like Zubac had a great year. But I watched a lot of Clippers games and I saw the impact that Norman Powell was having. So like I could understand like, you know, what you're saying and how you may feel that way just because he's not James Harden. Okay, fair enough. But overrated, I don't know if I agree with that. But like I understand what you're trying to say. So thank you guys so much for watching this live stream. I hope you enjoyed and see you soon. Bye!